Hello guys, so today we'll look at what are the key performance indicators when you are doing performance testing. Okay, in the last video we discussed about why performance testing is important and what is performance testing. In this video we'll look at the KPIs. So I'll go to the slide. So these are the important metrics. There are other metrics as well, but these are the most important ones that every tester should know. Now first one is response time. Now what is response time, right? Response time is the time taken by the application to serve an user request. Let me repeat, it is the time taken by an application to respond to the user's request. Now it might include different times. For example, you are hitting an API, right? So from the time you hit the API to the time that it gets back with the response is called response time, right, in layman terms. But this time might include the network latency and the time taken by the server to get the request and actually to respond back with the response, to connect to the database and get back the results, all of them included in the response time. But we don't it doesn't matter for us. What it matters for us is what is the total time taken, right? Now the response time is very good indicator to see if your application or an API that is designed matches with the requirement or not, right? So let us say in the standard is it should be within 5 seconds, right? So there might be some high performance applications where the response times needs to be less than 1 second as well, that you need to discuss with your business and higher management to have what is the SLA for this response time. Right now, when you are testing this, you have to take a keen look at what is the response time at variable workloads. Okay, now we'll move on to throughput. Now what is throughput? Throughput is the number of transactions that a server can handle within a unit of time, right? Let us say per second how many requests your server can take. Now that is throughput. Now how many transactions it can perform in 1 second, let's say. Now that is the transactions per second, right? That is called throughput. Now what is a transaction? Transaction is making a request and getting back a response. Let's consider it as a transaction. Now how many of these transactions can your server take in a unit of time is called throughput. Now why it is important? Because your response time might be low, let's say below 1 second for one request. What if we do hundreds of parallel users using the application, right? Whether we are able to, your server is able to take those many requests and get back with the response or not, right? So that is why throughput is very important. Now let's go to utilization level. Now what is the utilization level of your servers? Let's say your application is deployed in 5 instances and the utilization is, let's say, only 20%, even though you are at the peak workload conditions, right? Let's say 1000 users is the maximum expectation from your application and you are running your performance test at 1000 users per let's say second, and still the utilization is 10%, let's say, right? And that means you are wasting your resources, right? You might not need those many instances for your particular use case, let's say. But let's say if you have 10,000 users and your peak load utilization is 99% or 95%, then that is a red flag. Ideally, whenever you see utilization, it should be less than 80%, because you might be having other activities as well that should be happening on your servers, right? So ideally utilization should be less than 80%. Now that's about utilization. Let's go about scalability. Now scalability is how quickly your server can scale. Let's say you are at one instance and your application throughput is, let's say, 20 requests per second, right? 20 transactions per second. And let's say you've increased the one workload, let's say to double, right? Double the current threshold. Now how scalable is your application, right? Whether it is able to quickly increase the instances or not and serve with the same threshold level or maintain that threshold level or not. So this kind of is one of the indicator. Of course, there are many other indicators. Even with the response time, you have the network latency, server response times, all these things can be further segregated. But on a high level, you should be very important things are response time and throughput. Okay, next I'll move on to what are the different types of performance testing. Now there are other types as well other than what is listed over here, but the most important ones are these things, and depending upon your use case you might have to look at some other kinds of performance test as well, right? Let's say if you are in a cloud environment, you are in a multiple availability zone, you want to do that kind of fail safe testing, you might have to do other performance testing. Now these 5 are important that everyone should know. Let's say first one is stress testing. Stress testing is the one which you do beyond your acceptable capacity for your users. Let's say you have designed your application to handle 1000 users. Now what if you give 1100 requests per second? How the system would behave? Will it crash? Will it auto heal? Will it give higher error rate? No. What is the performance? Right? So the ideal expectation is it should safely handle by giving a proper error that we are experiencing some peak load and we'll please try after some time, some kind of error message instead of crashing. So that is the main purpose of doing stress testing. Now the most important one, and most of you guys might already be doing, is the load testing, right? Let's say you wanted to test your application at different workloads, right? Let's say with 100 users, 200 users, 500 users, 1000 users parallelly hitting the application or an API and trying to see the performance, and which is at the below expected levels, right? Let's say 1000 is the expectation and you are trying with the different varying workloads and seeing the performance, what is the response times, what is the error rate, what is the transactions per second throughput, all these things you will monitor, and you'll gain insights from that information of how your servers are performing. Now the third one is peak load test, again similar to load testing, but you try at the peak load conditions, like let's say 1000 is the expected load and you try it out at 1000 virtual users. Now soak testing is you test the application for very high time. Now why do you need soak testing? For example, let's say you are running an application for 5 hours, 6 hours or 10 hours and try and see if the application is able to maintain the same level of performance or not. Now why soak testing or endurance testing is important? Because you might have some memory leaks inside your application, guys, that you need to test. So that is the main purpose of testing for a variable amount of time, right? So any memory leaks or database connection exhaustion, network exhaustion, or any log files that might get exhausted. So these kind of checks, if not done properly in your application code, then soak test will give you the results. So let's say if you are running for 2 hours, it is running fine, and the 3rd hour suddenly it breaks, no? So that is because of any memory leaks or any database connection issues that you might encounter that when you are running for higher duration, right? So that is why soak test or endurance test is also very, very important. Now spike tests, these are particularly important when you have an application that goes under severe amount of spikes, especially when we discuss the scenario where you are going for an e-commerce application during a sales day scenarios. The spike will be immediate within the few minutes. Then how your application is able to handle such kind of workloads is also very, very important. There are other kinds of performance tests that can be done, like you can do capacity tests. Let's say your business team is not aware of how much capacity that they actually need, because but they wanted to try out with giving different workloads and see what we can handle and give that number to the sales team, right? So that can be capacity test. Let's say you try with 1000 users and 2000 users and see if we are still performing very good at 2000 users. Let's give that number to the sales team, and we'll that's rather than having a number beforehand, we'll try and do the performance testing and then arrive at a number which is safe for us to give to the sales team. So yeah, these kinds of performance testing. In the next video, we'll talk about what are the different tools that you can use to do performance testing, and why one tool is better than other, or which tool you have to go with, and for what kind of requirements, that we'll discuss in the next video. So that's all for today, guys. Thank you.